Joining us now to discuss is Seamus Bruner, the author of Controligarchs, Exposing the Billionaire Class, Their Secret Deals, and the Globalist Plot to Dominate Your Life. Thank you so much for coming on the show. What does this newest exposure to Chinese influence in America say about the state of our politics?
Yeah, Ivory, it's great to be with you. This Hochul story with the aide, Linda's son, is shocking, sort of in a way. I mean, you've got Joe Biden, as you mentioned. You did a great job in your monologue documenting so many Democrats who are completely compromised by the CCP. But this story is particularly egregious because you've got the millions of dollars, at least $6 million in kickbacks that bought the mansion in Manhasset. It bought the condo in Hawaii, a $2 million condo. You've got a Ferrari, the salted ducks, which is kind of weird. But I mean, this is a huge amount of money, which goes to show that this spy, this Chinese spy, was actually delivering. The Chinese government wouldn't be paying, these Chinese oligarchs wouldn't be paying her millions of dollars if she weren't delivering. And so as Kathy Hochul tries to distance herself, and they're calling this spy an aide. She was the deputy chief of staff. That is a high-ranking position, and she was allowed to just sort of operate with impunity for years, possibly longer than a decade. I mean, you heard her in that clip. She said she got into politics in 2008. That's almost 20 years ago. So we really need to keep exposing this stuff. And the Justice Department, I mean, they have to be applauded for eventually catching the spy, but we know that there are so many more out there.
Right. Yeah. What I didn't mention in the monologue was all, the details of those kickbacks and all the money, but the salted ducks, that was kind of out of left field. I guess, I don't know why she likes salted ducks. Is that a food?
I guess so. It sounds like a delicacy of some kind. It was prepared by a famous chef of the CCP. So.
Okay, so when I had covered Kathy Hochul's takeover amid the pandemic in New York, there were some of the things she was implementing that I compared to China, like new regulations that were passed without the approval of legislature. Legislators ended up suing over these regulations to send citizens to quarantine camp if the government decided on its own that the citizen might be a harm to other people's health. And that was something that China was a big fan of quarantine camps. And the fact that she went past the legislature to create edicts like this, I was comparing it to China. And now you think about Hochul being infiltrated by the Chinese, perhaps, you wonder how many of the things she's implementing have been influenced by them.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I talk about it in my book. Thank you for the shout out. Controligarchs are people who are sympathetic to China. They actually, you and I can't fathom this. The average American cannot fathom this. But our leaders in our elite classes, the billionaire class, they actually, a lot of them, like the Chinese system. They like the zero COVID policies. They liked the lockdowns. I think it's a little more sinister than simply they're influenced by China. You see it with the censorship regime, with the big tech companies. They want to be able to silence dissent and silence critics. Kathy Hochul is perhaps one of the most egregious perpetrators of enacting authoritarian policies. She wanted neighbors to snitch on each other and to report each other for violating COVID lockdowns. Like you mentioned, the egregious lockdowns. New York was one of the worst states for lockdowns. You had to show a vaccine passport. That's very much like a social credit score like they have in China. So it's more than they're just influenced. Yes, they are influenced, as this story shows, but they actually have authoritarian tendencies themselves.
Yeah, it's concerning. And we talked a lot about Democrats here, but Republicans not immune to this. Mitch McConnell is one of them that raises concern, right?
Yeah, so my colleague Peter Schweizer, we've been at the Government Accountability Institute in exposing this tactic that the CCP has. It's called elite capture. And they do that by money. So Mitch McConnell's wife, Schweizer's book, Secret Empires tells the whole story here. McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, is part of this shipping magnate family, the foremost shipping group. It is very closely tied to the Chinese military. And strangely enough, Elaine Chao was able to get we calculated it's approximately $20 million inheritance, but her father didn't die. So her father essentially just transferred $20 million. He's the guy who's tight with the CCP, to the McConnell-Chao family. And from then on, it was Mitch McConnell had nothing bad to say about China, never wanted to investigate China for any of their human rights abuses. And so Mitch McConnell is certainly perhaps the highest ranking Republican that we have found tied to the CCP.
Wow, crazy. Tim Walz is the other big concern. If the Chinese could infiltrate the president and the VP, that would be something. Why are you concerned about Tim Walz?
Well, Tim Walz, I mean, going back 30 years, he had these exchange programs, cultural exchange programs. And that's really what the Chinese Ministry of State Security, that's like their KGB or CIA. That's how they do a lot of their infiltrating, is through these cultural exchange programs. And so Tim Walz had this student exchange program where he brought American students over to China. This was funded in part by the CCP. So, I mean, that's just smoking gun proof that this was a pro-China effort. They would never fund an effort that was supposed to expose maybe Chinese human rights abuses or something like that. But the CCP cooperated in these exchanges. That's 20, 30 years ago. That's in the early 90s, early 2000s. But today, Tim Walz, I mean, ever since he became governor, he had Chinese diplomats, CCP diplomats, brought to his inauguration. He invited them. They were guests of honor. And from then on, as governor, he spoke at several organizations, had keynote lecture, primetime positioning at these events that were hosted by Chinese espionage front organizations. I mean, that is confirmed. It's really shocking. I've never seen a governor. I mean, even Kathy Hochul, while she had this spy, she wasn't going to United Front Group speeches and given the VIP treatment like Tim Walz was. And then there's an organization who is the Chinese American Association of Minnesota that is housing what is colloquially known as a secret police station for the CCP. They're called these overseas service centers that the CCP operates that are meant to round up dissidents, harass them, intimidate them. These would be people who have fled China. China has these police stations. One of them is in Minnesota, of all places. So you've got them in California, and obviously they all need to be shut down. The FBI busted one of them. But Tim Walz is very close with the organization housing this secret police station. So it's shocking stuff. He's given state money to that organization, Minnesota state money. He's also invested Minnesota pension fund money into Chinese companies, when a lot of other states like Florida, where I'm from, Governor DeSantis has yanked that money and pulled the pension money out of Chinese investments. Tim Walz is doubling down on China.
Wow, concerning stuff. Seamus, Bruner, thank you so much for coming on and shedding light on this for us. Great talking to you.
Thanks, Ivory.